So, what happens when a person's deeply held beliefs slam right into a scientific worldview that seems to contradict everything they've been taught? The film A Matter of Faith dives headfirst into that exact conflict. It takes the huge abstract debate of creation versus evolution and turns it into a really personal, high-stakes family drama. Let's break down how it frames this classic clash.
And that question is really at the heart of this movie. We're introduced to Rachel Whitaker, a college freshman who's leaving her Christian home for the very first time. And she pretty quickly discovers that her lifelong beliefs are about to be put to the test in a very, very public way.
Right from the jump, the film sets up these two totally opposing worlds. On one side, you've got Rachel's dad, Stephen. He represents her entire upbringing of faith and family. And on the other side, her super charismatic biology professor Kaman, who stands for this whole new world of secular academia she's just walked into.
So how does all this tension actually start to play out for Rachel? Well, it turns out the challenge to her faith doesn't wait around. It hits her on her very first day of class.
Yeah, Professor Kaman does not mess around. In his very first lecture, he takes that classic riddle, what came first, the chicken or the egg, and he presents it not as a puzzle, but as a solved case. He declares the egg came first, and by doing that, he immediately positions evolution as the only answer.
And you have to understand, for Rachel, this isn't just some lecture. It's a direct shot at her entire upbringing. When she tries to talk to her roommate about it, her concerns are just brushed off with this one single, really cutting line. Well, Daddy's not here. Oof, that one sentence just perfectly sums up her growing isolation and the huge gap between her old life and her new one.
But of course, her dad isn't about to just sit back and do nothing. When Stephen finds out what's going on in that classroom, he decides to step in, turning a private family problem into a huge public showdown.
And look, Stephen doesn't just, send an angry email. No. He gets in his car, drives 3 hours to the campus, and confronts Professor Kaufman face to face. His whole point is that this class isn't just teaching evolution as a theory, it's teaching it as a rock-solid fact. And in doing so, it's totally dismissing his daughter's entire belief system.
But instead of just getting into an argument, Professor Kamen decides to raise the stakes, like way up. He suggests a public, campus-wide debate. And, it's a really smart move on his part. He makes it sound like a fair and open discussion, but what he's really doing is forcing Stephen, an ordinary dad with zero debate experience, into his world, the academic arena.
So there he is, right in front of his daughter, and he feels like he's totally backed into a corner. He feels like he has to say yes. And just like that, a private family issue becomes a massive public spectacle. And for Rachel, this is her worst nightmare come true. She is completely mortified and begs her dad to call the whole thing off, but it's already too late. The stage is set.
All right, so this all leads us to the absolute centerpiece of the movie, the big debate. Let's take a look at how the film stages this epic clash between two fundamentally different ways of seeing the world.
Stephen kicks things off by basically questioning what science even means in this context. He argues that since no one was there to see the origin of life and you can't repeat it in a lab, then you can't really prove evolution in the strictest sense. His big point is, hey, if you can't prove it, then believing in evolution requires a leap of faith, just like any religion.
And Kamen just comes right back at him, basically dismissing faith as nothing more than wishful thinking. He argues that evolution isn't a belief system at all, it's a conclusion based on actual evidence, lab experiments, fossils, scientific analysis. He's drawing a really clear line in the sand. His view is based on proof, and Stephen's is just belief.
So you see how the movie sets this up, right? It's not a real discussion, it's a clash of total opposites. On every single big question, where life came from, what counts as proof, the film gives us two answers that just can't both be true. There's no middle ground here. It's framed as a battle where there can only be one winner.
Okay, so just when it looks like the professor has this thing in the bag, he's a professional. He's just picking apart the father's arguments. The movie pulls a total 180 and throws in a huge twist.
Professor Kaman is on a roll. He's confidently quoting Sigmund Freud, making it sound like God is just some kind of psychological crutch people invent. It really feels like Stephen has nowhere left to go. He's backed into a corner. But then, a voice from the audience completely changes the game.
Right at that pivotal moment, someone from the crowd just shouts out, "Freud was wrong." And this isn't just some random guy in the audience. The speaker is Professor Joseph Portland, and his interruption is about to flip this whole debate on its head.
And get this, the movie reveals that Portland has a history here.
He used to be a biology professor at this very university until he was fired 12 years ago for refusing to teach evolution as fact, and it was Professor Kamen who orchestrated the whole thing. He flips Kamen's argument around and says, no, people don't invent God for comfort. They try to get rid of a God they don't want to be accountable to. And with that, he reframes the whole thing. It's not about evidence anymore, he says. It's about intellectual pride.
So you see, Portland showing up out of nowhere isn't just for dramatic effect. It's actually the key to the film's entire message, and it's how the whole conflict gets resolved.
And this is where the movie really lands its central point, through Portland's argument. He says, look, since no one can go back in time and actually observe the origin of life, accepting either creation or evolution requires a leap of faith. The film's conclusion, the title, right? It was never really about science versus religion. It was about one faith system against another. It's all a matter of faith.
And from there, the movie just wraps everything up in a neat little bow. First, Portland apologizes to Kamen, which kind of puts him on the moral high ground. Kamen? He's totally speechless, doesn't even offer a rebuttal. And Rachel, who was so embarrassed before, now runs up and hugs her dad, super proud of him. The whole thing ends with this very clear choice presented to the audience. You either follow man's ideas or you follow God's word. So in the end, A Matter of Faith is way more than just a movie about a debate, isn't it? It's a perfect example of how storytelling can frame these really complex issues. It takes these huge, abstract ideas and boils them down to a personal story about a father and a daughter. And it really leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. How much of what we believe about these huge debates is shaped not just by the facts, but by the power of a really good story?